Retirement is often seen as a destination, but we believe it's an opportunity to pursue your passions, realize your dreams, and live a purposeful life. Great decisions, incredible lives. Retire with Intention podcast is about more than just money. It's about embracing the things that truly matter, the experiences, the relationships, and the impact you leave behind. Here is your host, John Creekmore.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in again to Great Decisions, Incredible Lives, Retire with Intention. And I'll tell you what, I'm so excited today to be able to introduce you to a new friend of ours, Dr. Denise Taylor. And it's been just a tremendous privilege to go, Denise, and read your parts of your book. And I walked away actually having taken probably more notes than what there is in the book because it prompted so much incredible thought in me as I've been thinking through things and thinking through these conversations that I've had with clients. And as far as with how they kind of have processed retirement or had not for a lot of people, and just kind of what they were thinking psychologically when they were heading into retirement and where they were at and some of the struggles they had, it got me to think there are so many people that really were used to working all day, every day for a living. And we know what that pacing is like. And then all of a sudden we get to that next stage of life and we kind of go into it unaware. And so I'm really excited. I think this conversation today is going to deliver so many key points for people as they're really trying to think through what does next stage look like. And so excited to have you here. Hey, Denise, will you take some time, introduce yourself, and talk about, really as far as the book itself, how did you come about writing it, but also your background, if you would.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thank you for asking me. And I'm a chartered occupational psychologist. I'm an associate fellow of the British Psychological Society. And it was in my late 20s that I've moved into psychology and really focused on that. And one of my key areas was always about career development. But I was always interested in, well, what happens at the end of careers? And early stages of my career, I was running pre-retirement seminars, and this was quite a strange thing to do was in your mid-20s, but I was just sort of like bringing them all together and talking about the non-financial aspects. Fast forward through many years of being a career psychologist and winning awards along the way and serving loads of customers and clients, etc. And then it reached a point around 6 years ago. It's like, where am I heading with my life? I started asking myself the questions I asked to my clients. And I'd always wanted to do a PhD, always. And at one point, I wanted one by the time I was 40. I wanted one by the time I was 50. And if I'd studied for one way back then, I'd have just done whatever was going to make me the most money. Because, when we're younger, I think that's one of our key drivers. But turning 60 and thinking to do a PhD, it's like, what do I really want to study? And given the age I was at and thinking about, well, we're all going to get older anyway, so why don't I research something to do with retirement? And what was really interesting was like elderhood and wisdom, but that's a bit into the future, maybe. So it was the transition, the adjustment from working to non-working. And as you said, it's a major transition. It's bigger than going to university, going to first school. So I started on the research. And 2.5 years ago, passed my Viva, became Dr. Taylor. And when you think I was 64, and when I first got my doctorate at 64, I go, wow. And I think it's useful in different ways because obviously the research is really helpful for people. But also, you see people who swim the channel and do all these amazing physical activities later in life. But, I think we should all still be learning. And people tell me I'm a good role model for just accepting a challenge and going and finding out more. And for me, it was academic, but it could be learning anything.
It's so interesting. I think one of the key things that I've taken away, just in looking at people that really enjoy retirement, and they have great fulfillment in retirement, I would truly define them as lifelong learners. They don't stop learning; they actually accelerate learning that next phase of life. And so I think that it's so true at age 60, getting your PhD and really in a field of study that has so much personal application. I've probably read over 100 different dissertations as far as at the doctoral level of either friends of ours or colleagues, or just some random ones where the title piqued my interest. And so many of them, I walked away thinking, what's the application from this study? But looking at what you studied, it has application for every single individual in the world. because we all head to that stage of life as we continue to age. And so, if you could look at your book, as I know from the dissertation, then and the PhD, and then out of that kind of was the outcropping of the book, right? And so, when you look at that, what would you say is like that one big key message of hope that readers can take away from the book?
I think, that often people say you're not too old and it's not too late. I think that's an important thing to do. I also think it's really important that we start thinking about our later life. And that comes easier to some people than others, because some people are long-term thinkers and others aren't. So if you can't think long-term, if you can't think beyond 6 months ahead, well, don't make yourself do it. But just keep on getting some ideas and putting together a box about things that you might do.
Hmm.
One of the key things that came out was about the importance of being curious. And to have a successful retirement, it's about being curious and taking on new ideas and being open to new ideas. Because the people that are very closed, they're not going to want to explore anything more. And for them, generally, their world is getting smaller and smaller.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're curious, and whether it be learning pickleball, I think that's the big thing that lots of people are getting into now, or learning singing in a foreign language, or whatever it might be, learning to bake maybe. You're testing your brain cells and you're coming out with something new, and it gives you interesting things to talk about. So you're not just talking about back when I was young, because nobody wants to hear people. You have those sorts of conversations.
Yeah. What a critical factor whenever folks think about successful retirement is just to be curious. And curiosity is such a great thing because it helps us not only explore new things, but it helps keep our mind relatively young, if we will, because whenever we're being curious, we have to process things in a new way. And I know that you had used this phrase, a successful retirement. Do you think that people have an idea of what a successful retirement is to them? Or do many people not really have any idea at all?
Okay, so I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people don't like the word retirement. They go like,
Mm,
nah, don't like retirement, retire, giving up, getting old. And I talked with my publisher about that, and I talked with my academic supervisors. But people use the word retirement when in the financial services industry, people talk about the retirement funds. So my idea is, let's rebrand it. Retirement is not the end, but it's just the start of a new phase of life. And for some people, they're going to carry on working. They might carry on, move to a different career. They might want to work part-time, might want to do some consultancy. So it's not saying you're going to be, in England, it was always about pipe and slippers and
mm.
like getting in the way of your wife. These terrible, terrible sexist old-fashioned views about what retirement is. But I think if we look at other people, so when I was young, people retired and they probably only lived about 10 years, and they'd often had physical jobs, and they were a bit worn out and just wanted to sort of sit and take things easy more. Whereas now, many of us are sort of knowledge workers. We're not physically worn out, so we can do different things. So there could be somebody who wants to be a traditional older person and look after the grandchildren and play golf and go on cruises, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. But also just to let people know that it can be anything you want it to be. And what I say to my clients is, but you can change your mind. You might decide, actually, I'm so burnt out. I want 2 years of just going on cruises and taking things easy. And then you get a new life, a spark about something that you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And it's really about being curious and finding those new things and recognizing, like you said, that maybe it's not the same thing all the time. You have the ability to change what you're doing. And it's really about finding transitions. And so, first, I want to ask you if you can hold me accountable. I'm going to try to not use the word retirement for the rest of our conversation today. And instead, we're just going to call it that next stage of life. And as far as being prepared for that, so as folks head into that, can you maybe walk through and explain this transition into retirement and how individuals maybe how can they navigate that change effectively? The first thing you said was to be curious. Is there other things that they can do maybe to help navigate things a little bit more effectively?
One of the things for people to be aware of is it takes time. And
Mm,
doing academic research, there's a difference between adjustment and Forgotten the other word. Yeah, it escapes me. But what we have is we go through a bit at the beginning where we're really not sure and we're in a period of flux. And then we come through. So instead of being in the transition phase, which is very transitional, we then come out and we've adjusted to retirement. So all the research I was doing was with people that have been 4 years, got through that messy. And now I've forgotten what your question was, John. I'm so sorry.
And no worries at all. And so whenever we think about transitioning into retirement, how can people really navigate that transition well?
So what I think is really useful, and when I run through retirement seminars, it's generally a couple of years beforehand, but I do think you can start thinking earlier is what are some of the models you might like to do? Maybe, your pension funds, savings are enough, but what you can do is money is not the issue. It's not that you've got to work to pay the bills. So is there a dream? Is there something you always really wanted to do when you were younger? Well, why not do it now? So it could be that. It could be that you want to go off and do world travel. It could be that you want to start up a charity. I like to get people to start thinking about the non-financial legacy. Because I
Mm,
say, when you talk to your financial planner about your pension and your money, but we need to also think about what is it that we leave behind after we're dead beyond the money. And I
mhm,
often think just being kind and being a nice person to have around so that, when you're gone, people go like, you know what, John always had time for people. And I think that's a small way of leaving a legacy. But we can also demonstrate to other people that we pay attention to our environment, that we get involved with our community. Maybe if, like me, you're a writer, it's something that you've written down. But it might be there's other things that you get involved with. So think about different things that you want to do. Because once you hit like late 70s ish, generally at that point, your health's starting to decline.
sure.
So you need to use these early years to do all the things that you would want to do. So start thinking. I don't like the term bucket list. I really don't.
Mm,
But just start thinking about some of the things that would bring you meaning and fulfillment, and make sure it's what you want to do, not what your partner or your mother or your children or your friend down the gym. They've all got their own views, but it's about do what's right for you. Because if you don't do it now, when will you?
mhm. Mhm. It's just so interesting because people always think about retirement and they think about it from the financial element, and yet they do not think about the other aspects as far as on what truly brings them joy and contentment. And, I really challenge people to think through some hard questions because I've come to realize that when we talk about this next stage of life planning, that the financial element, in a lot of ways, is the simplest element to figure out, but to actually have some of those deeper thoughts and conversations and to work through what is it that brings you joy? What is it that brings you contentment? What is it that brings you that satisfaction in life? That takes some time, but if people can actually navigate that and start to think a little bit deeper on those things, then as they transition into retirement, they're going to be in, quite honestly, a much better spot because if they figure it out 5 years, 7 years into retirement, then quite honestly, on the financial side, they've actually spent or maybe wasted some money doing things that truly did not give them that joy that they really seek in their life. So I think that is a key element for folks to think through. And I think about Denise, some of our clients over the years, and we have over probably 3,000 clients that we over the last 30 years that we've helped transition into and through that next stage. So it's a large number of information, a large number of clients. I think about them, I see their faces in my head, and I recognize they all come from different places. They come from different backgrounds, they have different family inputs, they have different experiences, and quite honestly, they have different psychological profiles. And so when I think that through, I just thought about your background professionally before you ended up getting your PhD, and I didn't tell you that's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations on getting that done. That's just phenomenal. But I was thinking about your background, and it's like there has to be a connection. I mean, do you see how psychological factors that can impact a person's adjustment to retirement?
But it does. And one of the key factors is around being proactive.
Mm,
But I can't make anybody proactive. I can't, there's no activities I can do that's going to give people drive and
mm,
determination. but it's one of the key things that makes a difference, as does being conscientious. And if you think about it, if you think about personality, conscientiousness is one of the big five of personality.
Hmm.
And people that are conscientious, they make their bed and they go to meetings on time and they do the preparation. And so they've already been starting to think about things. And they're probably more likely to eat healthy and do more activities and something. So if you're not conscientious, and it's not it's not become part of who you are by your 50s, some of these things are really tough things to start trying to change in people. But I can give people like structures and systems, and that can help them to some extent. So being conscientious is really important, as is being able to be resilient and to cope with setbacks, because whatever plans you've got, something could come along and change them. I mean, we don't know about the health of us, of our loved ones, of our parents, of our children, and all of those things can change the plans that we have. So sometimes it's worth having your plan B in
Mm.
case things don't work out, but really to think about what's important.
So then when you kind of think about what's important and just kind of looking at that and doing those pre-thought activities that quite honestly for a lot of people they kind of put off doing and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we're there. And so
Yeah.
whenever we think about that, can you elaborate a little bit more with how maybe some practical steps or things that pre-retirees, folks that are heading into that phase of as far as that next stage, how they can go about finding meaning and purpose after their full-time work?
Yeah, I think tied in with that is about people and relationships,
Mm.
because for many people, all the relationships are through the workplace, and
Hmm.
they socialize with them as well. And then they leave the workplace and they think they're going to stay in touch and they don't stay in touch. So a good way of having purpose is by doing things for other people. So it's useful to try and think about, is there a charity? Is there a local community, something that you could get involved with? Is there clubs, societies? So that's useful because that's one way of getting meaning, and you're giving back, and that's all part of your non-financial legacy. And it's useful to start looking into that beforehand so that you've got two or three things. It's like, I might want to help out at the local theatre, and I might like to help some children reading, and I want to do something about the environment, cleaning the river or the beach nearby. So having some of those things can be really helpful to start thinking about. But also we can think back to way, way back, when we were a child, what is it that we love to do? And it got knocked out of us because that's not a sensible career. You need to become an accountant or a lawyer
Mm.
or a doctor or an engineer or something. But it's like, but I always wanted to be a dress designer, or I always wanted, I wanted to be a ballet dancer. You can start ballet in your 70s. I mean,
Mm.
you're likely to be on the stage. Who knows? But it's like, well, all these things that I used to enjoy doing, and I'll often set my clients off on, let's just sort of go away, take the weekend off, stop playing about on your phone and reading the news and getting depressed by all of that. Just stop remembering the things that did bring you joy. And then you
Mm.
can try it out. And it's quite nice then, because then you can think, you know what, I'll do a bit of this and I'll do a bit of that. And I thought I was going to like that, but they're not my tribe. So then you find something else to do. But it's really useful in the early stages of next steps is to start thinking about, well, this might turn out as a good portfolio life, all these different things, plus time to spend on your relationships as well, with your partner and children and others, because that seems to be a big challenge with people. They don't know how to be a couple again when
Mm.
they've spent so much time apart. And it's worth finding out what your partner wants. And if you may just indulge me a moment, because I seem to have these conversations with random people anywhere, and there's a couple, and I spoke to them both separately at my gym, and the man was saying, when we retire, we're going to take things easy and we're going to go spending more time in Spain. And I'm sure whatever her name is going to want to spend more time with the grandchildren. And then I just so happened to be in the sauna with his wife, who was saying, when we retire, I'm going to start doing more things on my own, and I'm planning to do some long train journey on my own. I just want to go out be on
Hmm.
my own, try and have adventures on my own without always having to look after him. And I'm thinking, they haven't had this conversation. They haven't had this conversation. Do I suggest it to them? And I'm thinking, well, no, because they've not asked for my advice. So, it's a sign of being wise is you don't give advice unless unless people ask for it. But it
You
would be lovely to fly on their wall.
It's so true. It seems like we get so busy doing our daily life as far as from work and activities and whatever's on the family calendar that we do not sit down and actually talk with those that we're closest with, our partner, our spouse, or
Yeah.
whoever it may be, and our family members to truly get to know them and to find out what does this next stage look like to you. And without that, that's going to zap you of joy because all of a sudden you're going to be going on different paths that you never discussed. And so to even navigate, you have to have those conversations. And that's just part of the social construct that we live in. And that's phenomenal advice is for all folks to sit down and maybe on a regular basis start to talk a little bit about what does retirement look like to you. And ask your spouse that. And you may have an idea, and they may have an idea that might be totally different. And so you need to have those conversations. What
Absolutely.
so and also you had mentioned social. I think, Denise, that is an area that just in watching people, clients of ours, and then folks in the community that we're around, I think that is the missing element in planning for almost all people when it comes to that next stage of life, because a lot of their social construct was really centered around their work life. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden that's gone and they don't have that human connection as much as what they had in the past. And that can lead to all types of just, psychological issues. It can lead to emotional challenges because we need to crave that human connection, always at different levels. But whenever we do not have intentionality, so whether it be working in a charity, working at the food bank, doing things in our community, doing a hobby, doing some travel together, having dinner and sitting down and having a glass of wine and just chatting, whatever it might be, we need to be intentional with creating the social relationships that maybe we didn't have to be intentional with when we were working. So I think that's a phenomenal, what I've seen practically, that is just phenomenal advice, Denise. I love that.
It is important, and linked to social is friendships. I get asked to talk to quite a few groups about the importance of friendships, and we need friends to do different things with. We need somebody we can confide in because sometimes we don't want to talk to our loved one about
Mm.
certain things, and we need, somebody perhaps to do our shopping trips with, or to go to, different activities, and somebody who just builds us up. The
Mhm.
optimistic friend, because we all have friends who can sometimes be a bit down. So it's worth looking at your friendship group and thinking about, have I got a wide enough circle of friends? And one person could be fine and could cover two or three different things. But it is useful to have somebody who's going to encourage you to do things, and maybe you wouldn't do it without them. You need a bit of pushing. But friendships are so important because if we're lonely, I mean, there are people who like being alone. So I'm not talking about those because, some people can really appreciate having a great deal of time alone. But people that are lonely, that literally knocks years off their life. So it's looking for ways to build friendships and also looking for ways to be a good friend.
Mhm.
And some people are just not very good at listening, and they
Mm.
just talk about themselves. And that's really hard to be a friend if it's just every time they try and say something, and you just go, "Well, I did this," and it's just talking at people.
Yeah, it's not good friendship. It's not part of the social relationship. And so learning how to be a friend, that may be a new skill set for a lot of people because maybe a lot of their social construct was work to where it had a lot to do with just the social environment at work. And so, but to get out of that, you have to develop new skill sets for those social relationships. And I was thinking about new skill sets. You were just telling a story a little while ago about when you were at the gym and you encountered a husband and wife that a partner that they had some different ideas about that next stage of life. That really got me thinking about health as far as in that next stage. So, what role do you think health and let's just say physical well being has as far as in helping you to develop a fulfilling a retirement? Does it have a large part or do you think it has more of a lower part?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I've just been away for a few days at a sort of event, and I'm one of the older people there. And I was chatting to a woman who I thought was my age, and she wasn't. She was 4 years younger than me. But I was saying about how I'm stepping up to being older. I'm not old, but I'm like older. And she was saying, well, it's all right, but when you've got health problems, and I think I have a bit of a dodgy knee, but I'm more optimistic, so I tend to work through it, and it's like, I just do what I can around it, and then it's not dodgy anymore. But she was somebody she was putting a lot of focus on her health issues, and they might be quite significant. But she was saying, I used to be able to do this and I used to be able to do that. And it just got me thinking, if that was me, if my knee meant I couldn't go and do weights at the gym, well, I'd find other things that I could do. I'd look for something that could substitute. But I think sometimes people are just looking, this might be being a bit harsh on her, but sometimes people just look for an excuse not to do things and not to challenge themselves. Whereas, we've only got to look at, the Paralympics about what can be done when people have got physical challenges. But health is important. And a lot of us really don't give, we really don't bother, and we just take it all for granted. And I think often it's in our 50s, or it might be in our 60s or in our 70s, when we suddenly think, actually, I need to do more. To walk more or swim more or meditate more or start some very, very gentle yoga type activities. Our health, if we've got our health, is more important than how much money we've got, isn't it, really? But clearly we need enough money for the lifestyle that we want to have, but we need the health for the lifestyle that we want to have as well. And I think I've sort of hinted at it and not actually said out loud about being optimistic, because optimism, along with some of the other things that I said earlier, is very important. Because if you've got an optimistic personality, there's the work, I think it's been said elsewhere on other podcasts, about the work of Becca Levy from Yale. And she was saying that it's 9.5 years difference. You're likely to live 9.5 years longer if you're an optimistic type of person than if you're not.
Seriously?
And seriously, it might have been 7.5. I think it was 9.5, but it's one of the two.
Yeah.
And it's more important than smoking 15 cigarettes a day or being overweight. Just the whole thing, because if you're optimistic, then you're looking for the best in your situation. And then I can't make somebody optimistic, but you can, I think this is one of the good things about us aging, and what we can give back to other people is we can demonstrate what it's like to be more optimistic. So that people, if they ever say to me, like, you can always see the positive side, and I go like, thank you. But I think it's, if they see that something happens, you didn't manage to get a ticket, or this failed or something, but you can bounce back. I think it's really important for us as older people to, and that could be older people at any age really, but just to role model to younger people that it's all okay. There's always another way. And so optimism, being conscientious, being resilient, these are all really important things to do.
That plays so much in life, and it always does, as far as being an optimistic person. And, I've never thought about that as we transition to that next stage that most folks relate to as something called retirement. But now that I consider that, I consider family, I consider clients, that is a key component in those that truly have that joy in retirement. And quite honestly, most people that I know that live into their 90s, into their upper 80s, I would categorize them as extremely optimistic people. And so I think that is really is something that we all need to work on developing in our lives. And, I was thinking, Denise, we've covered a lot of phenomenal core concepts and core principles in a number of different areas, from health to the power of positivity. We've looked at a couple of different practical guidelines to walk through. But you have one concept in your book. I want to make sure we give it enough time as we're wrapping up the show. The final concept I really want to talk about, and it's something that I think is it's interesting. It's something a lot of folks don't think through, but it seems to be critical. That is this concept of identity. How do we identify ourselves, and how does that present challenges as we transition to a non-working phase, or maybe a working phase in a different way than what we have professionally in the past? A lot of times I meet people, and when they go to introduce themselves, they'll say, "Hi, I'm Joe." I work at ABC company, or I am an accountant, or I am an engineer, I am a teacher. And so our identity is wrapped up in what we do from a career standpoint. So this concept of identity, and we see that clearly in your book, how can retirees redefine their identity and embrace their new you?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I always remember being with somebody and there was a lot of, highly intelligent academics around the place. And we're having conversations, and my friend said, like, and oh, so what are you doing? He goes, like, I'm retired. And you could see everybody just close down. And it's
Mm,
like, well, obviously, worth talking to. He was. And I then went and had a bit of a mini coaching session with him and talked about all the things that he could do, that he could say, because he was very good on, he knows a lot about 17th century art, he studied
mm,
history. So there's a lots of other ways he could describe himself. So people will say, so what do you do? And you go, I'm an accountant, but that's not what you do. That's a job title.
mhm,
And then somebody in my book, Helen, people used to say, Helen, she used to be a barrister. And Helen used to get really miffed by that. And she's a local historian now. That's her thing. And she studies local history and writes pamphlets about it. And she used to say, like, I'm a local historian, because we can call ourselves anything that we want to be.
mhm,
And I think that's useful for people to think about, because when people say, so what do you do? And I don't want to give an example, because I think people could choose something themselves. But well, I suppose I am going to do in this episode. So what do you do? And pick out some of these things. And you go, like, I'm really fortunate. I've got a wide range of interests. So sometimes I'm doing this, sometimes I'm doing that. And when I'm not doing all of that, I'm going for walks in woods, and I'm focusing on learning the names of all the different birds in my locality. And
mm,
it's like, oh, that's interesting. So how many birds have you found out about already? And that leads on to a conversation. But people, it's about mattering. And I think that ties in with identity, the concept of mattering.
mhm,
And do I matter without my job? Do I just fade away? Am I seen as unworthy of being about? And I think we have to step up, because they're always talking about older people, women in particular, becoming invisible over 50.
mm,
Well, I'm not invisible. But I think if you take on that label and you think, nobody's interested in me, then your body language and everything just sort of comes in, and you're a bit more apologetic and you're lacking in confidence. And then people do tend to ignore you. But if you can sort of stand up straight and be bold and have things that you're happy to talk about. Sometimes it does need a bit of practice, and
mhm,
practice saying things with close friends that are going to give you good feedback. That's a good way to be. But yeah,
mm,
so much of who we are is related to our job, but we can change our identity to anything else. And often that's why doing things in the community can be such a good way to give ourselves a new identity. But again, if we don't like it, we can change it.
mm,
But we do need to address that. Who am I without my job? And I'll
mm,
sometimes give people that as a little bit of sort of homework to do, is like, think about all the other things that make you who you are, and all the things that could make you who you are. So it sort of really open things out. Do you want to be an artist? Do you want to start making cakes? Do you want to start learning more about Japanese food and start cooking
mm,
it?
mm.
Anything. And it's nice to have the time to try out some of these new interests.
Yeah, and you're right, and there's so much of it is identifying that new identity. We are so much more than the jobs that we do as humans and as individuals, and that really then leads into the positivity. I can see how those, as you start to understand what your new identity is, that can actually lead into having a more positive outlook in life. And it all plays together, which goes into your health, it goes into the things that you're doing, and ultimately it leads to that point of true joy and contentment. And I really, Denise, I so love this conversation. I love the principles in your book. And so thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I've really enjoyed having you here with us.
And I've enjoyed talking with you too. It's been a delight to meet over over the World Wide Web like
There
we
is-
do.
Isn't that great? Everybody, I want to tell you, on Denise's book, Rethinking Retirement for Positive Aging, we got the links in the show notes. And also, just so you guys know, we have 10 copies of Denise's book here at the office. We'll give away to the first 10 people that reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to Mackenzie at creekmorewealth.com. Again, Mackenzie at creekmorewealth.com, and just say, hey, I'm one of the first 10, and we will send you a copy of that book. It's such a blessing, and I want to encourage everyone to, if you are not one of the first 10, definitely pick up a copy of the book online and get it shipped out to you. So everybody, thank you again for spending time with us again this week, and look forward to connecting with you next week right here on Great Decisions, Incredible Lives. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for listening to the Great Decisions, Incredible Lives, Retire with Intention podcast with host John Creekmer. Follow us on social media, visit our website, and join our community of like-minded individuals redefining retirement and living incredible lives. Please leave us a review and share our podcast with others who may benefit. We wish you a future filled with purpose, fulfillment, and the joy of living your incredible life in retirement.